A loving mother with a selfless spirit.
I remember her laughter. You could hear Mother laughing from 2 rooms away.
She was really representative of the goodness in people. She loved her community. They loved her.
Is stabbed to death in a horrifying attack.
It was gruesome crime scene. There was a lot of blood.
The perpetrator left the victim with a 2-pronged serving fork sticking out of her throat.
The amount of devastation led us to believe that it definitely was a crime of passion.
Suspicion falls on those closest to her.
He was the husband that last saw her alive. He didn't really show any signs of grieving.
He failed the polygraph.
My first thought was that it was a domestic assault.
Her son had an argument with his mother that morning.
A neighbor had seen a teenager running away from the home that day.
Months go by without an arrest.
We kept wondering, why is it so hard to capture a murderer in this small town?
Then, just as the case is in danger of going cold, police uncover a dire warning
The note threatened more violence.
that leads to a deranged killer no one could have predicted.
Wow, we didn't see that coming.
Shenandoah, Iowa is a close-knit farming community home to just 5,500 people.
Shenandoah is your typical small town. It's just beautiful. The corn surrounding the towns. Everybody knows one another. You just are almost shocked at how nice folks are.
It's a small, peaceful community. People know their neighbors, take care of each other. You don't have a lot of violent crime of any nature.
The peace is shattered on September 6, 1988, when police get a disturbing call from local pastor Robert Borton at 3:40 p.m. He tells police his wife of 19 years, Cindy, is dead.
He found her body in the kitchen, lying in a pool of her own blood. He called authorities, who arrived immediately and kept him outside of the house.
It was gruesome crime scene. We found a female on the kitchen floor. There was a lot of blood everywhere. This person had been stabbed many, many times.
The perpetrator left the victim lying on her back in a pool of blood with a 2-pronged serving fork sticking out of her throat. That image stayed with me because it was remarkable in its gruesomeness. There were 4 instruments that appeared to come from her kitchen that were weapons of convenience for the killer.
There were 2 forks, a large 2-pronged fork, a 4-pronged fork, as well as 2 knives. There was a struggle. There were some cuts on her hand where she had fought the person and she had tried to get away from the person. The phone had been ripped off of the wall, and it was obvious that a lot of activity went on while Cindy was being killed.
Detectives observe that the pool of blood is not yet dry, meaning the murder likely happened in the late morning or early afternoon.
In addition to the blood in the kitchen, there were also some blood stains found in the bathroom.
It was obvious that the person had cleaned up in the bathroom because there wasn't any visible pools of blood, just blood that looked like it had been washed off of hands or clothing. We did not have the benefit of DNA testing back in the 80s. Blood would have been collected still because you can type the blood, and that was what was one thing that we'd be looking at. And of course, fingerprints, obviously, throughout the crime scene.
There was no forced entry. We were 99% sure that she knew who the perpetrator was. My first thought was that it was a family assault.
The amount of devastation that was there at the crime scene led us to believe that it definitely was a crime of passion.
Detectives had to speak with Cindy's husband, Robert, but are beaten to it by a new arrival at the scene, the couple's 18-year-old son.
I seen an ambulance parked in front of my house, and my father was leaning against the front of my mother's car crying, and I just knew deep down inside me that my world was never going to be the same. I dropped my backpack there in the middle of the yard and went running up to my father, and he then informed me that Mama was gone.
39-year-old Cynthia Borton was a born and bred Iowa girl. She and her brother were raised by loving parents just outside Des Moines.
My mother and my uncle would always tell me about the adventures that they had around the farm. Life was good for them. Everybody had to laugh, according to Mama. I remember her laughter. You could hear Mother laughing from 2 rooms away. You would have to rush in there to find out what it was that was so funny that made Mama laugh.
As a teen, Cindy worked at a local restaurant and soon after would meet her future husband.
My father wound up coming in there and doing the whole phone number exchange thing, and then they started going out, and one thing led to another.
The couple married in 1969. When the family moved to Shenandoah, Cindy had her hands full.
Mama just kind of assumed the role of the pastor's wife. She also worked at a donut place there. Mama always did what she had to do to take care of the family. I was her everything. I was very much a mama's boy. My mother was love personified.
Cindy's warm heart also extended to those outside the family.
Mama always had an open door policy for all of my friends. They always knew that my mother was there to be a second mother to them, somebody that they could talk to, that she never passed judgment on anybody. She was also very good with giving out the hugs. Mama was always there to give you a hand back up if life knocked you down.
Cindy loved her community. They loved her. She was really representative of a small town in Iowa, the goodness in people.
Cindy's death leaves many in the community wondering who could have killed her. Investigators have an idea on where to start.
Back in that time, about 85% of all homicides in the state of Iowa were committed by someone close to the victim. A husband is always a major suspect at the time we see a homicide like this, especially one with so much rage involved.
Robert was interviewed and gave the following timeline. He had gone to work that morning at Select Motors, where he was a part-time worker because preaching to a small rural congregation is not lucrative employment. Robert returned home at noon, as was his habit. His wife served him spaghetti for lunch, and at 1 o'clock he returned to work. Cindy worked at a local bakery. Her shift was to start at 2 o'clock that day. When she didn't show up for work, her employer became concerned and called Robert. He indicated that he thought perhaps she had simply taken a nap and overslept. Approximately an hour or so later, when she still had not shown up for work, he got the second phone call from his wife's employer. He went home at about 3:30 in the afternoon to discover Cindy dead on the kitchen floor.
What Robert says he did next raises a red flag to detectives.
After finding his wife and then calling to get some help, he took the dog out instead of, being there for his wife or trying to do something for his wife. He said he wanted it to be tied up so that the ambulance people wouldn't have to deal with his pets. That was very unusual and very strange.
Then, Robert offers up a theory investigators find completely ludicrous.
Bob was saying that his wife could have just tripped and fell onto this fork. That was totally not plausible. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. It's just, I can't imagine anyone, ending up in a situation, and certainly not with the amount of blood that was found there at the scene, too.
He thought that it was an accident. And that really raised eyebrows. How could you possibly think that someone had just fallen? You just think, well, this is someone who snapped.
Bob Borton was our prime suspect immediately after the death of Cynthia Borton because, first of all, he was the last person to see her alive, and then he also was the one that found her.
Coming up, suspicion swells around Cindy's husband.
His work clothing was laundered before investigators had an opportunity to examine it for blood spatter.
What does Robert Borton have to hide?
The only thing I want him to say is, I did it.
While police dig for evidence against their top suspect, a threatening clue sends shockwaves through the town.
There were a great many different and wild rumors, leaving notes at the scene. Cynthia Borton ain't nothing compared to what's coming. And hints such as the NS Night Stalker.
This story just got even more crazy and more sensational and more scary.
Police in Shenandoah, Iowa are investigating the gruesome murder of 39-year-old Cynthia Borton. Her husband Robert's erratic behavior is putting him in detective spotlight.
Robert commented that his wife had simply fallen on a serving fork and died an accidental death. These comments were certainly unusual and suspicious.
Police bring Robert to the station for a formal interview.
Bob did have a very strange personality and strange mannerisms about him when he was interviewed. He didn't really show any signs of grieving. You would have expected that a man having just lost his wife would be very emotional at the time he was being interviewed, but we didn't see that with Bob Borton. He was very matter-of-fact. He was just so casual in talking even about finding his wife. He acted like that was just everyday thing. It's just like talking about, well, what's the weather going to be like today?
Detectives question Robert about his relationship with Cindy.
He told us about, having arguments once in a while. He went in kind of a defensive mode about the questioning. When they're reacting like that, it does put up a red flag like that.
Investigators try to provoke a telling reaction out of Robert.
He didn't get upset when I accused him of being the one responsible for his wife's death. He didn't show sadness. He didn't cry.
His stoic but unemotional denials only increased their suspicions.
At that point in time, Bob Borton couldn't be held at all. We had no evidence to show that he was responsible. We had no information other than his matter-of-fact attitude.
Robert provides fingerprint samples, but with nothing concrete linking him to the murder, investigators must let him go.
This, frankly, was frustrating to some of the investigators involved in the case.
Cindy's body has been sent to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. While police wait to learn a specific time of death, they look to verify Robert's whereabouts.
His boss alibied him for the time that he said that he was at work that day.
Knowing it's still possible Robert killed Cindy when he went home on his lunch break at noon, what his boss tells detectives next rings alarm bells.
He changed his clothes when he went back to work.
Before the body was found, he dropped off his work clothing. It was laundered before investigators had an opportunity to examine it for blood spatter.
Had this all been part of Robert's well-executed plan?
There isn't always transfer of blood from a victim to a perpetrator, even in an extremely bloody killing such as this one. But of course, the likelihood that there would be made it important to examine the clothing, and that was impossible because those clothes, as it happened, were very quickly laundered.
That certainly was a little detail that made us think that it was him.
Investigators conducted a great deal of background interviews with neighbors, friends, co-workers.
We did look into the relationship between Robert and Cynthia Borton to see if it was a good marriage. And we did determine that they did have some problems. Everything wasn't roses and everything wasn't as you might think.
There was quarreling in the house. We thought maybe he had a lot of rage that he wanted to get rid of, and he was taking it out on Cindy. But we had never been called there for family disturbance or anything.
Needing to verify information about Cindy and Robert's relationship, detectives seek out their son, John, but the teen has vanished.
On the day she passed, all I did was shut down. My best friend, Jim, and his mother and father came driving by in their car and attempted to speak with me. I was not in the mood to talk. And then I just kept on walking.
When John arrives back home that night, detectives are there waiting.
They wanted everything that I could tell them while it was still all fresh in my mind. My father and I were still of the impression that it could have been accidental.
When asked about his parents' relationship, John admits there were problems.
There was some disagreements and a little bit of an argument, and then they realized that could I actually find anybody better for me? The answer they came up with was no, so it's like we were happy one time. We need to figure this out, get it worked out. That whole part of the wedding vows of till death do us part, they both took that very seriously.
John is too upset to say much more. Police end their conversation, but plan to talk with him again when he's less distraught. Officers are then dispatched to canvass the area around the Borton home.
They talk to the neighbors and try to find out if there's anybody who witnessed anything suspicious.
A neighbor had seen a teenager running away from the home that day, actually in the afternoon.
The neighbor's description of the teen sounds strikingly familiar.
John Borton, Cynthia's son, fit the description of the person that had run away from the house.
Had John come home early from school to murder his own mother?
It was a fascinating story. It was a mystery. He seemed like your typical teenager.
Bob Borton and also John Borton were the main and only suspects.
That in itself was the shocking part.
Detectives investigating the vicious slaying of Cynthia Borton have two prime suspects. Her husband, Robert, who found her dead, and now their 18-year-old son, who matches the description of a teen seen fleeing the area around the time of the murder.
John Borton, even though he was scheduled to have been at school that day, might have come home early. So John Borton early on was a person that we wanted to talk with and get more details about where he was on that day.
The day after the murder, John is brought to the police department for another interview.
They started with the questions about the home life and everything else. I told them my mother was literally my whole world.
When detectives asked John about the last time he saw his mother, he makes a startling admission.
John indicated in his interview that he had had an argument with his mother that morning. That, of course, was interesting and relevant information.
Mother and I did disagree because I was not in the mood to go to school that day. My last words to my mother that day were a bit harsh. I have zero pride or pleasure that I can take from that particular morning.
John maintains he was at school the entire day, but he didn't have any classes between noon and 3 p.m., the approximate window of time when detectives suspect Cindy was murdered.
The whole tone of the investigation changed. They were considering me personally to be a suspect. Who on earth could think that I would do this to my mother?
In a household with 3 people, the 2 surviving occupants would always be interviewed and looked at to see if they had an alibi.
We tried to determine with anybody at the school to make sure that they saw him there and to make sure that he was, in fact, in school, not just that he was supposed to be in school, but that people actually did see him there during that day.
Investigators took aside two of John's friends, Jim and Jackson, to find out if there was anything that might cause them to be concerned about John as a suspect.
The teens can't confirm John was at school the entire day, but they're adamant he's not the killer.
One of the first people to console him about his mother's death was Jim Bettis.
Friends of John Borton said Cynthia Borton's murder had been true devastation for John.
I heard some of my teachers kind of speaking in kind of a low, hushed tone thing, that the detectives had come by and questioned them as to whether or not I was actually at school. Could anybody verify that I was there all day like I was supposed to be? Eventually, they were able to reconstruct my alibi for the entire afternoon.
Detectives talked with his teachers who verified that he had spent that full day at school.
Cynthia's son John is ruled out as a suspect. 3 days later, the autopsy report comes in and police look for any insight into what exactly happened that gruesome day.
Cindy suffered a horrifying death. The medical examiner found that Cindy had been stabbed 29 times with at least 4 different instruments, 2 knives and 2 serving forks. In addition to stab wounds that directly led to her death by puncturing vital organs, she had defensive wounds on her hands and forearms. She struggled with her assailant. She had to know that she was dying at the hands of her killer.
The autopsy report also provides a detail crucial to the investigation.
Based upon his finding of a stomach full of completely undigested spaghetti, the medical examiner estimated the time of death as 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Cindy and Robert had shared a meal of spaghetti between 12 and 1 o'clock. Robert placed himself in that home alone in his wife's company at the estimated time of death.
It really made Bob Borton our prime suspect. He was the husband that last saw her alive. He was the husband that was the first to find her dead on the kitchen floor. He and his wife had had difficulties throughout their marriage, had had problems.
Investigators decided that it was important to keep working on Robert. He was really their only feasible suspect.
Based on the findings of the autopsy report and mounting circumstantial evidence, Robert is called back in for another interview.
One of our agents was very aggressive in interrogating Bob Borton about his wife's murder and accusing him of being the murderer. And Bob, again, sat very calm and still and was not irate about being accused of having taken his wife's life. The investigators decided to give me a call and ask me to conduct a polygraph examination of Bob Borton and do that right away before he had a chance to think twice about it. The relevant questions that I asked Bob Borton is, were you responsible for your wife's death? Did you cause your wife's death? Did you stab your wife? He was just very humdrum, very relaxed, and very, well, I guess, you'll have to do what you have to do because I didn't do it.
The polygraph results tell a different story.
He failed the polygraph. The results were that he was lying and that he was culpable in this crime. So investigators were, in fact, increasingly convinced that Robert had killed his wife.
After the gruesome murder of Cindy Borton, her husband Robert, the prime suspect in her murder, has just failed a polygraph.
When I did see those results, the thing that next happens is for me to go in and interrogate him and try to determine why he was being deceptive. I needed to try to get a confession from him. When I confronted him with the results of the polygraph examination, he didn't shake his head no that he didn't do it. He didn't try to respond to me in any way, shape, or form. He just basically sat in a chair and didn't move. The only thing I want him to say is, I did it. And so we were very aggressive in interrogating Bob Borton about his wife's murder.
Robert Borton never wavered in his denial that he was responsible for this.
Robert's behavior under questioning becomes even more unusual.
He did, in fact, fall asleep in the chair. The only time that anybody has ever fallen asleep in the middle of one of my interrogations. Bob Borton's reactions were not what we would have considered to be normal.
Despite failing the polygraph, the evidence against Robert is purely circumstantial, so detectives have no choice but to let him go.
At that point in time, we're thinking we must have missed something. There must be something more involved that we're not aware of.
The lack of an arrest unsettles the town further.
The people of the community really are concerned when there is an immediate suspect why that person's not apprehended and taken to jail. But we need more information. We need more evidence.
The members of the community were increasingly convinced that Robert had killed his wife. They expressed those concerns. They brought a great deal of pressure on the chief of police.
The public was just as anxious to get it solved as the police was. We wanted to get this case cleared up so gossip and things would die down after, of course, this happened. He wasn't preaching for a while, and then people just quit attending.
There was a real change my father noticed. People who were open and friendly with him, all of a sudden, they quite often would go as far as to cross the street so that they would not have to walk near him, would not have to speak with him. I did my best to at least attempt to continue my life as well as I could.
Laying Cindy to rest is tough on the young teen.
The only time I can remember my mother having a brand new dress was the one bought for her to bury her in. It's the only brand new dress I ever recall her having.
2 months after Cindy's murder, Robert and John leave Shenandoah.
It was unbearable for my father to continue to live there. People who he thought had been friends before had shut him out.
He moved to a town 3 hours away, and we watched his movements, where he went, who he was meeting with.
The police were really struggling because they had nothing. They had no one else.
2.5 months later, when the state crime lab sends investigators the results of the fingerprint analysis, they hope it'll be the crucial evidence for which they've been waiting.
Robert's fingerprints were not found on any of the murder weapons or the phone. This, frankly, was frustrating to some of the investigators involved in the case. It was solid evidence that someone other than Robert Borton was very possibly the guilty party in this murder.
The news is a huge blow to the investigation.
It's concerning whenever cases are not immediately solvable, and as time passes, the prospects for solving them become smaller and smaller.
We just waited for authorities to make an arrest. And when they didn't make an arrest in the months that were going by, that's when we started to realize this is somebody that they don't know who it is.
3 months after the murder, as detectives redouble their efforts to unearth new suspects, another crime in Shenandoah comes to their attention.
In the weeks preceding and following the murder of Cindy Borton, there were arsons in the town of Shenandoah. Even though arson is a different crime than murder, it's a violent crime. And when one has a series of violent crimes, in this case, the arsons and the murder, all occurring within a matter of weeks, it would be only normal to at least examine the possibility of a connection between the two.
On November 30th, another arson occurs, and a clue found at the scene leaves investigators stunned.
The arsonist left a note referring to the 2 prior arsons and Cynthia Borton, and in fact threatened more violence in that community, saying that the arsons and Cindy Borton ain't nothing compared to what's coming.
Oh my gosh, this story just got even more crazy and more sensational and more scary.
Detectives hunting the killer of Cindy Borton have just received a mysterious clue linking her murder to a series of arson fires across town.
There was a note that was, in fact, very intriguing, and the note referred to all three arsons and Cindy Borton, obviously raising the possibility that the perpetrator of the arsons was also the perpetrator of the Cindy Borton murder. The note in question was signed the Night Stalker, NS, which copied the name of a highly publicized murderer in California.
At the time, the Night Stalker had already been arrested, so this was clearly a copycat killer.
It was rather apparent that the perpetrator was someone who used that name out of convenience and imitation.
He was calling himself the Night Stalker. Wow, he's just crazy.
There were a great many different and wild rumors, leaving notes at the scene and hints such as the NS Night Stalker were quite possibly a cry for attention. This would have to be investigated. The note was examined for fingerprints, and indeed some latent fingerprint ridge detail was found on the note.
The prints are sent to the crime lab for analysis.
It was important not only to continue investigating the murder, but also to investigate the arsons for purpose of developing a suspect on the murder. There had been 3 arsons in the community. One had been at the Broad Street School. The letters NS were found slashed on a bridge near the Broad Street School fire.
There was another fire set in a school teacher's pickup, and there was a note, "The Night Stalker strikes again."
This case was a genuine whodunit. Even though we had the Night Stalker note, investigators didn't know who had authored it or who had committed the arsons.
I never really would have expected this case to go where it went. You know, it wasn't something that we expected from the beginning at all.
Several days later, detectives get the fingerprint results from the note, and they don't match back to anyone in their database.
There was, in fact, a killer at loose in their community.
As every week went by, and then the months, we kept wondering, why is it so hard to capture a murderer in this small town who committed a murder in such a shocking, unbelievable manner?
On January 31st, 1989, police finally get a break in the case.
5 months after this murder, a young man named Jackson, a high school student, came into the police department and informed authorities that the previous day he'd had a visit from a friend, another teenager, and that in the course of their afternoon visiting with each other, this friend had told him that he had some very shocking information and something that was bothering him. More specifically, that he had murdered Cindy Borton. This information was a shock that shed an entirely new light on the investigation.
When Jackson came into the Shenandoah Police Department, yes, that definitely was a big break. His friend had told him things that happened at the crime scene that only the killer would know.
Jackson's friend described the murder that he had committed and even went so far as to draw a small diagram indicating exactly where the body had been left in the house. Jackson shared this drawing as well with the authorities, which was important and surprising because it appeared quite accurate.
He told Jackson, "I'm going to show you where the knife is." And he did that. And that's when Jackson realized, oh, he's really done this. And later that day, even though he was sworn to secrecy, he thought about his own mom and how the killer had been a guest in their house, and he thought, wow, that could have been my mom. So it wasn't hard for him to go to the police after that.
At this point, investigators were aware that Jackson had indeed very likely spoken to Cindy Borton's murderer.
Jackson said that James Bettis was the one responsible for killing Cynthia Borton.
Jim Bettis was a close friend of John Borton. They were classmates until Jimmy dropped out of high school. He was close enough to John and interacted with the Bortons so much that Cindy was very involved in Jim's life. He even thought of Cindy as a second mother to him. She tried to help him, tried to persuade him to return to school and get an education. She was a very good friend and mother figure to the young man. Jim was certainly not a suspect up to this point, but his statement to Jackson rang true.
It was amazement at that point in time because we talked to James Bettis previously. James Bettis became the prime suspect because of his admissions to his friend, but we need more corroboration. Jim was taken to the Shenandoah Police Department and he was interviewed. Jim did confess to the arsons, as a matter of fact, but denied ever having said anything to Jackson about Cynthia Borton's murder or having any involvement in Cynthia Borton's murder.
Jim agrees to have his fingerprints collected. He's also willing to undergo a polygraph.
During the polygraph examination, the questions I was asked were, was he involved in the death of Cynthia Borton, specifically whether he was the one that committed the crime.
Jimmy Bettis insisted throughout that he did not kill Cindy Borton.
When I quantified the polygraph examinations and I actually gave a numerical figure to each of his reactions, if they're over a -6, that strongly indicates to us that he's deceptive. James Bettis came up a -23. So there is absolutely no question he was the one involved in Cynthia Borton's murder.
It was a big shock, and it really left us, and I think everyone, scratching their head. Wow, we didn't see that coming.
After the horrific slaying of Cindy Borton, detectives get their biggest break when her son's friend fails a polygraph.
Jim Bettis's polygraph, according to Agent McCleary, showed deception on his denial that he had murdered Cindy Borton.
It was very unusual that all of a sudden this person would become a suspect who was a teenager, and also he was good friends with Cynthia's son. And he had been in Cynthia's house many occasions.
Investigators confront Jim with the results.
The very next thing I said was, we all know exactly what happened on September 6th. You were the one responsible for having killed Cynthia Borton. There's no question in anybody's mind now. And he came out and said, I did it. Okay, I did it.
Jim Bettis had not been on our radar at all. We never dreamed that he might be capable of something like this.
James Bettis told me that on September 6th of 1988, he was walking around town, he was thinking about his father. He was thinking about how he hated his father.
His dad was always telling him that he was no good, he wasn't going to amount to anything. It was terrible. He hated his dad.
He needed to be able to get that rage out. And how he was going to do that was by seeing if he could actually kill.
His statement was that he wanted to kill his father, but that he knew he couldn't get that job done, and so he killed someone who was far more vulnerable, and that Cynthia Borton was a victim of convenience.
Police believe Jim showed up at the Borton household, just narrowly missing Robert, who had gone back to work after lunch.
Cynthia Borton answered the door and allowed him to come in because he had been there many times previously.
During his confession, Jimmy Bettis indicated that he had asked Cindy for a glass of water, which led her to walk into the kitchen. He followed her there, approaching her from behind, and grabbing a knife, immediately slashed her throat from behind. He stated he had used a pocket knife of his own in addition to Cynthia Borton's kitchen utensils. And that after the crime, he took his pocket knife, stained with Cindy Borton's blood, and threw it under a bridge. This was important information. It would corroborate his confession if in fact that knife could be found and if in fact it had Cindy Borton's blood on it. Investigators scoured the area, found the knife where Jimmy Bettis described that they would find it, and when it was tested at the laboratory, indeed it had not only Cindy Borton's blood, but also Jimmy Bettis's fingerprint.
On February 2nd, 1989, detectives charge 18-year-old Jim Bettis with first-degree murder and 3 counts of arson.
The investigator told me that Jim had been arrested and he had confessed repeatedly. My first response was, no, he did not do this. He was my best friend. He was the first person that I trusted that was not an actual blood relative. It occurred to me that in at least some way I am responsible for this because I am the reason that he came into my house, that he was accepted into my house, and my mother is gone. There is nothing I can do to get her back.
At trial, Jim is convicted, and on November 13th, 1989, he's sentenced to life in prison.
Jimmy Bettis was a very troubled and angry and rage-filled young man. Had this crime not been solved when it was, there's every reason to be concerned that there would have been more fires, if not more murders.
My best friend committed this heinous crime of murder against somebody who trusted him, supported him, and cared for him. He frequently told me that we were brothers forever, and I honestly felt the same thing for him. And then for him to turn around and do such a horrific action, there is a bit of relief knowing that he will never be out again for the rest of his life.
One after another, a husband dead of natural causes.
There was no autopsy, no testing. He was cremated. His ashes were scattered at a lake. That was it.
A son dead from seizures.
And I'm like, oh my God, this mother must be devastated. She lost her husband, now she loses her son.
A daughter hanging on to life in the ER with flu-like symptoms.
It's bad.
Okay.
She was as close to death as you could get her.
And a mother and wife, a devout church organist, left to shoulder the burden.
Either this is a terribly unlucky family or something fishy happened here.
But just how fishy? That's what police want to find out in a stunning interrogation.
Dear God.
Tonight, piecing together the secrets in a highly unusual family, the tell-all diary. Their bedside reading?
We had a book on poisonous plants.
Their garage, always prepared for an emergency.
Who has antifreeze in the summertime?
And a very strange way of expressing sympathy.
I didn't want another one to die in the house.
And why is that?
Because houses are nasty after somebody's died in it.
So who's left in the family, if they can survive long enough?
Did you think somebody else was going to be next?
Talking on camera for the first time only to 2020, the daughter who did live to tell.
I consider them as killers who hate me.
What's wrong with these people?
What were you thinking at that point?
Oh God, another one.
A family plot.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us this Saturday night. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. David is away. Get ready for something you rarely see outside a courtroom. All the detective work and the interviewing of suspects that goes into catching a killer. It is an investigation that 2020 worked on for 2 years. A bizarre family plot that culminates in the discovery of a secret diary. And this ominous line from it that says so much. Only the quiet ones will be left. Here's Deborah Roberts.
At the foothills of the Ozarks sits Branson, Missouri, the Las Vegas of the Midwest. Drive 45 miles north on old Route 66 and you're in Springfield, a tranquil college town where the buckle of the Bible Belt meets beer joints. Here on Page Street, in a modest 900-square-foot home, Diane Stouty and husband Mark embody that unlikely mix of holy water and firewater. She's the church organist down at Redeemer Lutheran. He's the lead singer and guitarist of a local blues band, Messing with Destiny. You'll get the irony a little later. Together, the couple, former college sweethearts, are raising 4 kids in that small house. 6 people, 3 small bedrooms, 1 bath. Tight quarters for what looks like a tight family.
Did you get any sense of what their relationship was like?
As far as I knew, Mark's life was great.
Charles Alexander is Mark's close buddy and the drummer in the band.
He was always happy with the kids. He was always happy with his wife. He loved them. He loved his family. And it was just a great family.
Well, things aren't great for everyone. See, Diane isn't just praying in church, she's paying the bills at home. Okay, Mark picks up an occasional shift bartending, but Diane, a nurse, is the breadwinner.
She seemed to be stable, ended up supporting him. He was the house husband, staying home with the children.
And if Mark was a laid-back Mr. Mom, the actual mom of the house was civil, if a bit standoffish.
Was Diane friendly, warm?
You know, she was friendly to the point that I can tolerate you being in my driveway.
As the years wear on, life just keeps heaping more weight on Diane's slight shoulders, supporting her family in that cramped house and coping with some heavy challenges. 4th grader Brianna has a learning disability. Sean has autism. And oldest daughter Sarah, a college grad, is still at home with no job and a mountain of student debt. But inside that Page Street pressure cooker, Diane's beloved child is blossoming. 22-year-old Rachel, a star student. This is the relationship that would forge the whole family's fate.
She congratulated her every time Rachel had an accomplishment. When you look at it from the outside in, you think, that's a really close mother-daughter relationship, and isn't that great?
Ron Davis with ABC affiliate KSPR-TV took us to the Stouty home.
And what was it about Rachel that drew her mom to her so intensely, do you think?
By all indications, Rachel is an exceptional human being. Very smart, very talented, artistic.
On Facebook, Diane raves about her beloved Rachel, her art, her academics. But nary a mention for her husband, Mark, who in April of 2012 is finally having his moment in the spotlight.
We had a good band. We were literally taking off.
He's flying high. Messing with Destiny is booking semi-regular gigs in Branson, joining the Aretha Franklin impersonators who get marquee billing. It's also Mark's birthday weekend. These are pictures from rehearsal that night, where Charles notices that Mark isn't quite himself.
What did you think was going on with him?
He was just so out of whack. And it wasn't like he was drunk or anything. He was just out of whack. He wasn't with us.
Then the next day, more odd behavior.
He just showed up at my door one day, Saturday. And I said, Mark. And he goes, I'm here to celebrate my birthday, Charles. Only one thing struck me so out of place. His skin color.
What did it look like?
Yellow. His skin was actually a yellowish color.
So something was wrong with him.
Something was wrong with him.
He's right. On Easter Sunday, Diane comes back from church and finds her husband dead in bed.
I was devastated.
Did you have any inkling that anything was wrong? Did you get any clue that Mark's health might have been bad?
No.
Yet Diane tells authorities her husband's been sick and refused to see a doctor. There's a curious ring of blood around Mark's mouth, but it's not enough to alarm the medical examiner, who rules the death due to natural causes.
It was a bit of a shock, but I thought, well, he doesn't really exercise, doesn't really cook, so probably not real healthy eating habits.
There was no autopsy, there was no testing. He was cremated. His ashes were scattered at a lake. That was it.
Diane organizes a memorial service at Redeemer Lutheran Church.
What was that like?
Well, that was It was sad. It was a sad event. The wife wanted us to do a song in his honor. So we played the song.
Mark's favorite song, Darkest Hour. This is their audio recording from that day. As the family copes with Mark's sudden death, there's a small consolation, a $20,000 life insurance payout, enough for Diane to move the family to a new neighborhood and a larger home.
They moved into this house right here.
Oh, big difference.
It definitely is. It's a step up from where they were.
When we come back, the Stouties may have moved on up, but their bad fortunes are just beginning.
The coroner's van was in their driveway.
Because whatever afflicted Mark seems to run in the family.
I said it was impossible. I was floored.
And eventually, police will suggest a different diagnosis.
My husband died last year of a heart attack.
Did he?
Stay with us.
2020 Saturday continues with more of A Family Plot.
At Redeemer Lutheran Church, Pastor Jeff Sippy tends his flock with fervor and passion.
We're jumping for Jesus.
And in the summer of 2012, devout organist Diane Stouty has good reason to lean on the pastor's sermons for strength.
Then Mary arose and went with haste into the hill country. And so you can see a woman with a mission.
Her husband Mark has recently died, and she's just moved with her 4 kids to this friendly street, hoping to put that sadness behind them. Rhonda Anderson, a church secretary, lives across the street.
Did you see them going and coming? One day the garage door was open and I thought, I'm going to go over there and say hi. And just as I got over there, it was really like they looked at me and closed the garage door, really, because I could still see them standing there. So I don't think they wanted to talk to anybody.
Rhonda doesn't take it personally, leaving her private neighbors to themselves. Until weeks later, one Sunday in September, she looks out the window and is shocked by what she sees.
The coroner's van was in their driveway. A policeman said there was a death in the home. I was blown away.
Once again, death has knocked on the Stouty's door. The firstborn child, Sean, gone at 26. Diane tells police he had flu-like symptoms for 3 weeks.
Well, she reported she checked on him at about 6:30 in the morning, went to church, and then when she came back from church, found him not in bed anymore, but on the floor without a pulse.
She explains that her son had a history of seizures, and though like his dad, Sean has an odd ring of blood around his mouth, it doesn't look suspicious. So the medical examiner, after an autopsy, decides that the second Stouty family death in 6 months is due to prior medical issues.
They're thinking, wow, poor family. What bad luck. No one was asking questions.
And nobody questioned that story?
No.
Even though her husband had died just months before?
Yes.
After police leave the scene, Rhonda walks over to check on her standoffish neighbor. Surprisingly, Diane answers the door.
I said, we just saw the coroner's van was here. Are you okay? Is everything all right? And she said, oh yeah, my son died.
Was she distraught?
No, she said it to me just like that. She said, my son died. Very matter-of-factly. I just was shocked.
Rhonda may be one of the few people Diane talks to about Sean's death. Because for him, there is no funeral, no memorial, not even an obituary. Like his father, Sean is quickly cremated.
I'm like, oh my God, this mother must be devastated. She lost her husband, now she loses her son.
Now only the Stouty women are left. Diane, her darling Rachel, 12-year-old Brianna, and Sarah living their secluded lives.
I think they closed the doors even tighter because you didn't see them outside. I don't know how they even got their mail because we didn't see them at the mailbox.
Then, the following June, could it be true the Stouty plague strikes again? This time it's Sarah. Diane has seen this end badly before, so she takes her 24-year-old daughter to the emergency room.
Sarah is sick, goes to the hospital, gravely ill.
Sarah's in very grave condition. It does not appear that she is going to survive.
Sarah's kidneys shut down, pancreas and other organs failing. Worst of all, her brain is hemorrhaging blood. Diane turns to Facebook, maybe hoping for divine intervention, asking for prayers as my daughter Sarah is in critical condition. Diane's brother-in-law, Michael Stouty, is floored by the post.
Wow, it's like a lot of bad luck here in this family. What's going on?
A good question. What is going on?
911, where is your emergency?
Finally, someone in Springfield, someone claiming to be close to the family, calls in a tip to police, hinting that the pious church organist may harbor an unholy family secret.
What did the caller say exactly?
That Diane Stouty might be responsible for 2 or 3 homicides. Again, brought up Mark's death, Sean's death being very close proximity to each other. Also spoke about the potential that Sarah was going to die as well.
So the caller was essentially blowing the whistle on Diane Stouty.
Correct, yes.
Armed with that anonymous tip, Springfield Police Detective Neil McCamus begins investigating. He starts by pulling the reports on Mark and Sean's deaths. The uncanny similarities are stunning.
Mark was experiencing flu-like symptoms for several days prior to his death. Same type of description with Sean. Now we have Sarah that's also in the hospital with flu-like symptoms.
Police are now connecting the dots. Then Detective McCamus visits the hospital, where he gets more troubling news from Sarah's doctor.
He had told me that they had performed several tests. They couldn't figure out what was going on, and he said that he was suspicious that it was a possible poisoning case.
So your radar goes up?
Definitely.
Police figure it's about time Diane Stouty answers some questions. She voluntarily comes to the station, and in interview room number 3...
Is it Stout?
Stouty.
One of the strangest police interviews we've ever broadcast begins. Diane discusses Sarah's critical condition.
I'm looking at the lab reports and it's like, you can't be living. Her kidneys were shot. She had a brain bleed. Her pancreas was acting up.
Well,
it's bad.
Okay.
I mean, she was as close to death as you could get.
Her affect may seem strange, but remember, this is a woman dealing with great stress, emotionally and financially, and her family's crumbling one by one.
My husband died last year of a heart attack. He had a lot of medical issues.
Did he?
So, yeah.
What kind of stuff did he have?
Oh, he had liver problems. He was diabetic. He wouldn't quit smoking.
Do you have a son as well?
No, not anymore.
No.
He died. He stopped breathing during one of his seizures.
I've just never heard of anybody dying from a seizure before. Is that pretty common?
It can happen.
And I'll be back here.
The detective steps away, but when we come back, he does too, to turn up the heat on the Merry Widow.
There's been some things that have come up during the investigation.
It's time to learn what's really going on behind closed doors at the Stouty home.
I'm horrible. I'm a horrible mother.
Stay with us.
"2020 Saturday" continues with more of A Family Plot.
Over the course of 14 months, the quiet, God-fearing Stouty family seems as cursed as an Old Testament transgressor. Member after member inexplicably struck down. Mark Stouty, who fronted a blues band, and 26-year-old son Sean, both suddenly dead. 24-year-old Sarah lying in the ICU. Her kidneys and brain failing. Now police want to know, is this a matter of bad luck or bad intentions? Which is why Diane Stouty, wife, mom, and church organist, is sitting in the interrogation hot seat.
Don't know what I can tell you.
With cameras rolling, Detective McCamus asks about her marriage, and for the first time glimpses a reservoir of resentment.
We were still married, but it was not what you call a good marriage.
Have there been any infidelities on either side?
He had. He was running around and he would drink and smoke pot and...
So he wasn't a very good guy is what you're saying?
Yeah. Even with all his faults, I still loved him.
In this police interrogation video, Diane reveals cracks in the foundation of the Stouty home.
Was there ever any physical abuse towards you?
No.
Nothing like that?
I mean, I didn't think it was that bad, but my kids would probably say otherwise. I wasn't happy.
Okay.
Now watch as he deploys a classic interrogation technique, shifting from inquisitor to sympathizer.
I'm a believer myself, so I understand where you're coming from on that.
He tells Diane sometimes even the righteous reach a breaking point. So what happened with Sarah?
As far as did I do something to her, I didn't do anything to her. I mean, I guess I could have taken her to the ER sooner, but I didn't know.
A major reveal. Diane may have delayed taking her daughter to the hospital.
And that was just kind of where her story started to crumble.
But I'm horrible. I'm a horrible mother.
Then a suggestion that Sean may have been suicidal. But again, she admits she did nothing to help.
He'd been threatening to kill himself, and I didn't want to bother because I was tired of it. I'm such a crummy person.
Now's your chance to tell us why and to show some remorse and ask for forgiveness.
Then she drops a bomb.
Put it really short and sweet. I knew they were drinking antifreeze.
Drinking antifreeze?
And I was so mad at them, I didn't want to take them in.
You knew, Diane, that they were drinking antifreeze because you were giving it to them.
And I didn't know what else to do. I really didn't.
And there it is. After 2 hours in the box, Diane Stouty quietly confessing to poisoning her own children with antifreeze.
This is a woman who's admitting that she killed her son and tried to kill her own daughter. What are you making of this?
I was just totally astonished, to be honest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There were times I didn't know what to say or how to react.
How long had you been giving them the antifreeze?
Maybe a couple of days.
And what were you putting it in?
Coca-Cola.
How much would you put in?
A couple of teaspoons, maybe.
But why antifreeze? She explains that it's easy to get and easy to disguise. The main ingredient, ethylene glycol, a colorless, odorless, sweet-tasting, and deadly chemical.
Killing someone with antifreeze is a classic way to try to mask what you're doing. It takes time, it's relatively flavorless, and there are no immediate signs after death unless you're looking for it.
Now it's all pouring out, a full-blown confession. Diane admitting she poisoned her husband Mark the exact same way, spiking his Gatorade with antifreeze. Apparently, she'd had it with a husband she considered an abusive deadbeat.
By then, I hated his guts. He would throw things at me. He would throw things at the kids. And I guess I just had enough.
Killing her husband's awful enough, but a mother poisoning her own children? This mom's motive is downright chilling.
Both Sean and Sarah would just basically, I don't know, trash the house and never helped support or even contribute. Sean would be interfering with whatever I would do.
So if he was just a constant bother, wouldn't leave you alone.
Well, he was more than a bother.
With a pest, would that be a good word for it?
No, it was more than that.
My husband got on my nerves. I couldn't stand him. And my son, was a pest. I mean, did she seem like at her wit's end?
No, she, again, throughout, she stayed flat. Even when she's telling me that information, she seemed unfazed.
Yep, unfazed even by the ultimate kicker, why she poisoned her daughter.
And then with Sarah, you talked about, she wasn't getting a job, and then she had these student loans, and you were going to end up having to pay for them.
That's pretty much.
And you just had it with her as well.
I'm not a perpetual killer. I'm just stupid. I regret doing it. I really do. I've screwed up everybody. I've screwed up my whole family.
But it's too late. Here come the steel bracelets.
Right now, you're going to be under arrest.
Case closed? Not by a long shot. See, police are about to search the Stouty home and will find a purple diary with some very purple prose.
This was a key piece of evidence.
It will prove that Diane had a partner and eyes on another target in these horror movie homicides. Next.
"2020 Saturday" continues.
As the freight trains roll through Springfield, Missouri, the wheels of justice are turning slowly too. Police are interviewing 22-year-old Rachel Stouty, a star student, gifted musician and artist, her mom's pride and joy.
Mom was there every step of the way, really encouraging and cheerleading Rachel to be great.
But now her dearest mommy, Diane Stouty, is behind bars after confessing to the poisoning deaths of her husband and son and the attempted murder of Rachel's older sister.
Hey, Rachel. Can I get you the switch with me?
Okay.
Police just hit Rachel with the news.
Confusion, shock. I mean, that's... Nobody expects to have somebody that they know do that.
In this interrogation tape obtained by 2020, Detective McAmis lays it all out. Demure Diane has delicately engineered a ruthless culling of her own herd. Only the pious and the productive will make the cut.
Did you think somebody else was going to be next?
Darrow can be poisoned just for sitting around on YouTube. I don't do anything around the house. Brianna sure as heck doesn't do anything around the house.
Rachel fesses up that her mom had some unusual reading material.
We had a book on poisonous plants. I mean, she would talk about cyanide.
Then a critical moment across town. Crime scene investigators are busy combing through the Stouty home. These pictures show a house in disarray.
This was the home, the second residence.
Detective McAmis gave us a tour inside with permission from the new homeowner.
This was Sarah's room. There was couches, there were papers, just kind of things strewn about. She kind of had an office space set up. You could see there were some computers.
Laptops, flash drives, sculptures scattered about. And in the garage, pay dirt.
This is where our crime scene detectives located the antifreeze on the workbench.
And right next to the antifreeze, the other compound in Diane's cruel chemistry. An otherwise unassuming six-pack of Coke.
Coke was described as what was given to both Sean and Sarah in terms of poisoning them.
The concoction right there.
Yes,
The
correct.
Coke and the
That is
antifreeze.
it.
In the bedroom, a curious detective makes that dynamite discovery. This is Rachel's purple diary, haphazardly thrown on a shelf. Its contents a trove of sinister secrets.
It appeared to be a journal entry written by Rachel, knowing that Mark and Sean were getting ready to be killed.
So at first you're thinking this is a mother, an evil mother, who's tried to wipe out her family. And now you discover her daughter might be involved helping her?
Yes.
That journal entry dated June 13th, 2011, nearly a year before Mark died. It reads,
"It's sad when I realize how my father will pass on in the next 2 months. Sean, my brother, will move on shortly after. It will be tough getting used to the changes, but everything will work out."
That's pretty chilling.
Very.
She's writing in a journal about killing her father and her brother.
It was extremely alarming.
I'm going to have you wait here for just a second.
Back at the station, Detective McAmis leaves the room and gets briefed on that explosive diary. He returns in a different mood.
Rachel, do you recognize this?
Yeah, I remember this.
This is Missouri, and now it's time to show me.
You wrote this then, is what you're telling me? Okay.
I'd had a lot of really bad dreams about them dying. I talked to Mom about it, and she mentioned she was thinking of hurting them.
Rachel's bad dream just beginning. McAmis isn't buying her story or her tears.
What did you tell your mother?
That it would be quick. That it'd be easy.
Rachel reveals the awful truth. Mother's favorite was also Mother's little helper.
When did you guys come up with this plan?
I mean, we talked about it, like Christmas.
She's sitting right here. She's starting to tell you the whole thing, and she basically owns up to it.
to hear the daughter and the admissions that she's making and that this was a plan, and I was totally shocked, totally stunned by everything that had taken place. It was just a completely surreal feeling.
The mother-daughter duo carefully plan and research all options. Suffocation, pills, Googling how to kill your husband. The devout Christians even explored witchcraft.
Like on my computer specifically, there's a lot of Wicca sites.
Before settling on antifreeze.
Because in general, you could put it in something and you couldn't taste it.
What else did she tell you?
She wanted a specific tasteless one.
Rachel, whose idea was this?
Mom brought it up, and we discussed.
Mom recruiting daughter to help her systematically kill her husband, her son, and then poison her daughter? It's almost unheard.
It was supposed to be just Dad, but pretty soon Diane turned her attention to Sean, the son she thought was irritating. Listen to how little it took to end up on her hit list.
Sean, we argued on a lot because I still think we could have put him in like a assisted living, but she wanted him out.
What did you say when she talked about killing Sarah?
Sarah was equally unneeded. We could have found someplace else for her. She was very adamant on that Sarah was just a burden, that Sarah needed to be taken care of.
Rachel, too, now under arrest, charged with murdering her father and brother. Her sister Sarah still fighting for her life.
When Rachel was arrested, there was a big clue found in her purse.
That's right. Her purse was searched, incident to arrest, and there was a note.
With her sister Sarah hospitalized, the star student Rachel had authored a poem worthy of Edgar Allan Poe.
Once upon a time, there were 6. Now, there are 3. Only the quiet ones will be left. My mom, my little sister, and me.
Wow. That's pretty cold stuff.
This is a very cold and depraved murder.
The Springfield poisoning case. 2 people dead, 2 in jail, 1 in the hospital.
The family was poisoned with antifreeze.
The next day, the tale hits the news like a twister. While down at the county courthouse, a rare sight. A mother and daughter, both arraigned for murder.
No way, this cannot be true. Not right here in our little neighborhood.
But no one is more surprised than Mark's old bandmate, Charles Alexander.
I was floored. And when I heard that he was poisoned, then I just cried. I collapsed. I said, I can't believe this woman did this.
Looking back, he begins recalling little quirks about his friend's wife.
I was never really allowed in the house for some strange reason. It was always at the garage. And it was so strange. I seen the antifreeze bottles sitting in the garage, and I'm thinking, who has antifreeze in the summertime?
Strangest of all, Diane's blasé manner after Mark died.
I went to her house and asked her what happened. And she proceeded to tell me like she was giving me a recipe to a cake. No emotions, no nothing.
Just matter of fact.
It was just like, oh, he died and you add 2 eggs.
Also shocked, Diane's fellow church members at Redeemer Lutheran. Well, maybe except for one. Remember that anonymous 911 caller who first tipped off police?
Do you ever find out who blew the whistle on her?
We were able to determine that the anonymous caller was actually the pastor at Diane's church.
The pastor turned her in.
Yes.
Pastor Jeff Sippy.
If you are not praying for your children, if you are not deeply invested in them, I'm going to tell you this, no one else is either.
The leader of the flock compelled by his own conscience to root out the wolf among them. He declined our requests for an interview.
So he knew that something was evil here.
I think he definitely had his suspicions. Diane's demeanor after the deaths, he told me he couldn't take those feelings, that he had to call it in.
When we come back, 2 Stouties in jail awaiting trial, 2 Stouties dead, and a 3rd in ICU. But this one regains consciousness and lives to tell. Did she suspect that her soda was spiked?
So you read in her journal she was trying to kill you?
She tells her story only to 2020 next.
"2020 Saturday" continues with more of A Family Plot.
You're looking at a woman who defied all the odds and lived to tell, surviving a vicious poisoning.
Well, this is where I sleep.
24-year-old Sarah Stouty has had to relearn to walk and talk.
I'm right here.
Her speech still stunted from the irreversible brain damage she suffered. Tonight, for the first time, she's speaking out about the horror and betrayal. Sarah lost her father Mark suddenly in 2012, and her brother Sean just 5 months later.
You found him dead.
Yes.
That must have been horrifying.
Traumatizing.
And more traumatizing, learning that her mom Diane was not her protector, but a predator, poisoning them all with antifreeze. And the icing on the cake, her younger sister Rachel was part of the plot.
But I was asking, why? Why did my mom and sister kill my dad and brother and harmed me?
Did you believe it, or did you sort of assume this can't be true?
I assumed that it wasn't true. They were innocent people being blamed.
But any trace of sympathy evaporates after Sarah reads in the newspaper why her mother poisoned 3 family members. She simply despised them.
They really planned this heinous crime. I was shocked. I just felt like I wanted to strangle my mom because of what she did.
The big question, why did Diane bother to rush Sarah to the hospital after leaving her son and husband to die at home? In a follow-up interview with a clearly rattled Rachel at the Greene County Jail, Detective McAmis wants to know.
When Sarah got so bad, why did you take her to the hospital?
Was it some last-minute tug of Christian conscience? Apparently, no.
I didn't want another one to die in the house.
And why is that?
Because houses are nasty after somebody's died in it. I get a lot of nightmares.
But what Rachel tells police next may be the most heinous of all. She and Mom Diane weren't exactly finished.
Brianna, who's she next? When were you guys gonna kill Brianna?
Sometime after Sarah.
Brianna, the youngest member of the Stouty clan, a tender 12 years old, too young to drive, but old enough to drink her mother's poison, antifreeze, in her root beer.
They were going to kill the little girl as well?
12-year-old girl.
What's wrong with these people?
And what was the reason for Brianna?
Because I know there's no way in hell I'd be able to take care of her. I can't take care of me. So how could I ever take care of her?
She had described Brianna as a burden. They didn't want her around the house. That was her explanation.
4 people? They would have killed 4 people in this house if they could have?
Correct. Rachel said that her mother was the only one that understood her. They could relate to each other, and it was just going to be those 2.
Do you think this was just a case of a mom and daughter who just, in some sick way, wanted to have a simpler life?
I don't think that there's going to be any acceptable, remotely rational explanation. The question is, how could this have possibly happened?
Did the police blow this thing? Could they have prevented Sarah's poisoning by connecting these dots?
I think it's easy to go back now, and there was nothing at that point to indicate anything malicious. Neither one of them knew about the other.
When you have physical findings at the autopsy that match the story that was given, typically other organs aren't looked at microscopically.
Saying antifreeze is difficult to detect unless you're looking for it. Later tests did confirm that Sean's body had the presence of that killer chemical, ethylene glycol, found in antifreeze. That news came a bit late for Sarah. Still, she's learned to accept her new reality, living in an assisted care facility, more alone than ever.
Do you still consider them family?
Not anymore. I consider them as killers who hate me.
You're angry.
I just felt like I want to slap both of them and calling them B-words.
Their family plot uncovered, perhaps it's no surprise that mother-daughter murderers would eventually turn on each other. And sure enough, Rachel made a last-ditch effort to save herself with a plea deal.
Reaction to a guilty plea from Rachel Stouty, the Springfield woman charged with poisoning 3 of her family members.
Throwing her mom under the bus.
That's crucial. The fact that her daughter has pled guilty, seems ready to testify, could in and of itself be enough to convict her and potentially send her to death row.
When we come back, Diane Stouty in court. And for the first time, the daughter she poisoned coming face to face with her sister and mommy dearest.
And what would you say to Rachel and to your mom?
Stay with us.
"2020 Saturday" continues.
Judgment Day for Diane Stouty. She enters the courtroom, her back against the wall, facing death by lethal injection. But then,
You intend to enter a plea of guilty in this case?
Yes.
pleading guilty to killing her husband and son, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Also in court, in the front row, the daughter she tried to kill, 24-year-old Sarah, facing her mom who poisoned her with antifreeze.
I'd rather be a survivor than a victim. She not only took away my dad and brother, but she took away my independence.
Callous to the end, Diane never bothering to look at her damaged daughter. Yet weeks later, when it's Rachel's turn to be sentenced, she dissolves into tears, reading a statement to her sister.
I'm sorry that I couldn't find the courage to stand up for what was right. Your suffering could have been prevented, and I hate myself for not being there for you.
And yet for all the pain and loss, today Sarah says she harbors no ill will.
I forgive my...
Nashville, Tennessee. 13-year-old 7th grader Tabitha Tudors is preparing for the school day.
She was a good student. She made straight A's.
I would help her with her math homework. When I was in school, I was pretty good in math.
He was better at math than me, so I sent her to him. Tabitha had a good relationship with her dad.
Tabitha is by far the youngest of 3 siblings. Her brother Kevin is 25, and her sister Jamie is 21.
My wife was about to hit 30, and she wanted another child, so we had another. She was a little spoiled. She was our last child, and we spoiled her.
Tabitha was always the entertainer, I think, when she was a younger baby. She would always have this like little funny face that she would make, and she would like breathe in and out, and of course it got the entire room laughing.
1, 2...
Play hide and go seek or read joke books, constant laughing, and we'd had fights too. But yeah, she wanted to be just like me.
A tight-knit family, the Tudors make it a priority to spend their free time together.
Tabitha loved going to the racetrack. Every Saturday we would not miss a race.
Tabitha is especially close to her mom.
Tabitha wasn't a particular 13-year-old. She was more like an 8-year-old. She hung on me like a leech. My car couldn't even roll out of the driveway without her wanting to be in it. So she went everywhere as I went. She was a cut-up. Always cutting up, joking. She got that from her daddy. It wasn't from me. She'd get in the car and she'd be singing to the music. She likes singing.
Tabitha is an enthusiastic member of the choir at the Tudors family church.
She said she was going to be a singer.
Whatever my wife was doing, Tabitha would come in and do her, and then my wife even taught Tabitha how to make homemade biscuits. And Tabitha fixed them for us one time, and we ate them. They was real good.
According to the Tudors, their hometown of East Nashville is an up-and-coming neighborhood with a few rough edges.
In 2003, East Nashville was not the place that you really wanted to call home. But for me, I grew up here. I've always felt safe here. There's loud music in people's cars when they drive down the road, break-ins. But for us, we never had any issues.
We've lived here 30 years and we never had no trouble. I mean, nobody ever bothered us, and we don't never bother nobody else.
Nonetheless, the Tudors worry about their youngest child's safety.
I think my parents were more protective of her. She was the baby, their last one growing up.
Every night, Tabitha sleeps on the floor in her parents' bedroom.
She'll start out in her bed, and then when I wake up in the mornings to go to work, she's at the foot of my bed. And I asked her one time, I said, "Why do you do that?" And she said, "Because I want to be close to you." So I never stopped her.
The morning of April 29th begins like any other morning for the Tudors family. Tabitha's mother gets up for work early while her daughter is still sleeping.
I worked with Metro Schools in the cafeteria. I got up at 5. I got ready for work. She was laying at the foot of my bed, and then I stepped over her and went and got ready for work.
And at 7 o'clock, I woke Tabitha up and told her, "Get on up, baby, so you can get ready for school."
Some mornings she would eat breakfast here, and then if she has homework that she didn't finish, she would do it that morning before she left.
Tabitha was in good spirits after getting her school report card the previous day.
It had all A's on it. She was excited about it. I was proud of her.
Her father, Bo, heads to work at 7 a.m., and Tabitha spends the next few minutes reveling in her good grades.
I said, "I love you." She said, "I love you too, Daddy." I said, "Well, I'm leaving," and I left.
At 7:50 a.m., Tabitha heads out the door. Her bus stop is 1 block away at Boscobel Street and 14th Street.
And I told her, don't leave the house until like 10 to 8, because the bus run at 8. I said, they'd give you 5 minutes to walk up the hill and 5 minutes to wait on that bus.
Tabitha's mother has told her that if there are no other children at her bus stop at 14th Street in Boscobel, she should walk down 1 more block to 15th Street, where more kids will be waiting.
I've always told her, you don't sit up there on that wall by yourself to go down to the second bus stop.
Later that afternoon, Tabitha's mom returns home from work.
And when I got home at 1:30, she gets home at 4, and then she never come home on time. So I knew then something was wrong, because she was always on time. She was never late.
Almost immediately, Deborah goes out to look for her daughter.
And I allowed her 10 minutes for the bus to be late, and then I went up there, and she wasn't up there. And then there's kids up there said that they didn't see her. So I came back home. I drove up to the school, and I banged on the door and banged on the door.
One of the teachers gives her some alarming news. Tabitha wasn't on the bus that morning, and she never made it to school. Trying not to panic, Deborah heads home and calls Tabitha's friends to see if she's at one of their houses. But no one has seen her all day.
I got home at probably 10 minutes to 5. I was in a panic because, I didn't know where Tabitha was.
I received a phone call about 5 o'clock maybe. My mom asking what my sister had on that morning. And I told her I didn't know because I didn't see her. Why? And she said, well, your sister never made it home. We're calling the police.
At 6 p.m., a now frantic Deborah calls the police to report Tabitha missing.
By the time the police were called, she had already been gone for 8 or 9 hours from her bus stop.
The Tudors tell police officers that they just found out Tabitha wasn't in school all day and hasn't been seen since the morning.
If she were abducted, that gives a suspect, 8 to 10 hours head start. We didn't know if we were looking for her in the Nashville area or she could have been anywhere in the country, just about in the time frame.
They wanted to know what she was wearing that day, and I just was folding her clothes the day before, so I looked through her clothes to see if I could figure out what was missing. And I believe she had on a blue top with blue jeans and white sneakers.
Investigators do an initial search of the Tudors' house.
They went through some stuff, fingerprints. They took her hairbrush, her toothbrush to do a DNA. I had told them that her money was still here, and even her door key was still here. She didn't take her door key that morning because I was always here when she got home.
Tabitha has left behind all of her clothes and makeup and $20 in cash with no clues as to her whereabouts.
Early on, it was just unknown, if she'd left the house. They just didn't know what happened.
Due to the lack of evidence and Tabitha's age, investigators suspect that she may be a runaway, so they don't issue an Amber Alert.
For an Amber Alert to be listed, there needs to be some type of reasonable belief that a child has possibly been abducted or is in danger. There was a possibility, at least, that Tabitha had left of her own free will, and there was no information that she was seen with a dangerous individual or that she was abducted.
But the tutors insist Tabitha would never have left home of her own volition.
Yeah, Tabitha wasn't a rebellious child. My parents, they were pretty laid back with us, yet they were strict, so we walked a straight line. Tabitha was afraid to get in trouble, I think, so I knew that she hadn't ran away or skipped school.
I tried to explain to the police that she wasn't a runaway. I told them they didn't know my daughter like I do.
Whether 13-year-old Tabitha is a runaway, lost, or missing, police know that time is of the essence. They execute a search along a 5-mile radius, touching the nearby Cumberland River and Shelby Park.
They did a pretty substantial search that night.
Concerned people from the tutors' neighborhood pitch in to help.
They were all searching everything with flashlights. And then the whole community came together when they found out about it and helped look for her. I mean, it was people I ain't even never seen before come out to look, and they searched and searched. I didn't go out and search for her. I was really hysterical. I didn't want to go nowhere unless she came back home.
13-year-old Tabitha Tutors went missing on her way to the bus stop in East Nashville, Tennessee.
I didn't want to know that this was really happening. I was trying to stay strong for my wife and my other 2 children.
We were, hoping that she was just going to come down the street or somebody was going to drop her off on the corner and she could come home.
After a sleepless night, the Tutors still have no news about Tabitha. Officers return in the morning to do an in-depth search of her bedroom and discover an intriguing clue.
There was a note with initials on it indicating like it was someone maybe that Tabitha had a crush on.
The note is in Tabitha's handwriting with the initials TDT, N, MTL. Tabitha's initials are TDT, Tabitha Danielle Tutors. But Tabitha's parents say they don't have any idea who MTL could be. While detectives continue to dig, an unrelated tip surfaces involving a possible eyewitness to Tabitha's disappearance.
There was a child that went to school with her. He told police that he seen her get into a red car.
The 11-year-old classmate of Tabitha's says that he was waiting at the second bus stop at 15th Street and Boscobel when he saw Tabitha walking toward him from 14th Street. And then a car appeared next to her.
He said the car came down Boscobel from 14th headed toward 15th. He didn't give a very detailed description of the car, but he did say it was red.
The boy tells police he got a good look at the driver of the vehicle.
He said that it was a male black driving the car and that she got in the car and the car went back out the way it had come in.
He said that Tabitha was in the car. He don't know if she got in on her own or if somebody pulled her in or threatened to make her get in. But he just said it was a dark-skinned guy with a baseball hat.
But the tutors say Tabitha would never willingly get into a stranger's car.
I always told her, you know, don't ever get in a car with nobody. My best friend asked to take her to school one day, and she wouldn't do it. She said, my mama says no, and she wouldn't go.
Based on the boy's account, investigators believe that Tabitha got into the car somewhere between the two bus stops on 14th and 15th Streets. Detectives decide to use tracker dogs to learn more about her movements.
They were given an article, I think some stuffed animals of Tabitha's from Tabitha's house.
And they went out the front door, they went to the right, went up the hill, and they crossed 14th at Basketball and went down to the third or fourth house, made a circle and come back, and they stopped.
The dogs lose Tabitha's scent in the middle of the block between 14th and 15th Street. It's the exact route that the boy described seeing Tabitha walk that morning before getting into the car.
I believe based upon the dog's scents, she went to the first bus stop and halfway down is when she was picked up.
Investigators look for the African-American male the boy described picking up Tabitha and the red car he was allegedly driving.
I was trying to figure out who had a red car, and I couldn't figure out if we knew anybody that had a red car, and we didn't know anybody that had one.
In the meantime, police discovered that Tabitha's classmate wasn't the only one to have seen her that morning.
There's a woman that lives on the corner house. She saw Tabitha walk into her bus stop the morning that she disappeared.
There was a man who saw her at the intersection of 14th and Basketball. There was another lady who drove through who was familiar with Tabitha, and she saw her in that same area. There were at least two of Tabitha's schoolmates who saw her crossing over 14th to Basketball. So there were at least 4 people that said they saw her.
The people that saw Tabitha that morning said she was holding something in her hand, looking at it, and we're assuming it was her report card. And she's proud of her all her A's and B's, and I guess she was just looking over it again.
Although the new eyewitness accounts give detectives a more precise timeline of when and where Tabitha was last seen, none of them reveal anything out of the ordinary. But within hours, investigators have a breakthrough closer to home. They learn of a man familiar to the Tudors family who matches the description of the driver of the red car.
Investigators started kind of taking a look at Jamie's boyfriend at the time.
My boyfriend at the time was a black gentleman.
He lived with Jamie in the Tudors' home some months before Tabitha went missing.
They just questioned him because of the dark colored skin with a ball hat. I mean, he wore ball hats.
Detectives find that Jamie's boyfriend was aware of Tabitha's routine and where she got on the bus each morning.
The investigators started trying to determine where he was on the morning that she disappeared and try to create a timeline and also find out what potential vehicle he might have been in.
Jamie's boyfriend tells police that he and Jamie weren't together at the time, and he hadn't stayed at the Tudors' home for months. And they find no connection to a red car. In fact, Jamie's boyfriend didn't own a vehicle of his own.
But was said to have sometimes driven Jamie's or driven different relatives' vehicles. There was really no direct link. He obviously knew Tabitha, and at one time they'd had a really good relationship.
Jamie's boyfriend also has an alibi for that morning. A friend he'd been staying with confirms they'd been together the morning that Tabitha disappeared. He passes a polygraph, and investigators find no evidence linking him to Tabitha's disappearance. With Tabitha now missing for 48 hours, investigators are once again on the hunt for a lead. They turn their attention back to the paper found in Tabitha's room, containing the initials MTL. They canvass people in the neighborhood and in Tabitha's school, and soon find a potentially promising match to the initials: the 18-year-old son of a couple who are friends of the Tudors. But when police question him, the hopeful development quickly falls apart. The young man was in school the morning Tabitha went missing.
There was no reason to believe that he had anything to do with her disappearance.
Investigators find no other evidence related to the note or the initials MTL. But within a few hours, a classmate of Tabitha's comes forward with new information.
One of Tabitha's friends had indicated that at least on one Saturday, she and Tabitha had gone to the library in East Nashville, and they'd gotten on a computer and gotten on apparently some chat lines or some chat rooms. The young girl was able to take investigators to the library and show which computer they used. That computer was taken and thoroughly examined forensically by our department.
While detectives anxiously wait for the results, forensic investigators scour the computer, looking for evidence of Tabitha's chat history. Then, later that same day, a local woman comes forward with an unrelated and disturbing story that police hope could lead them straight to Tabitha.
This lady went to Mrs. Tudors and said, have the police look at this man because he had my daughter.
Her 13-year-old Tabitha Tudors mysteriously went missing while walking to her school bus stop. Police zero in on their most hopeful development yet. A Nashville mother with 2 young daughters has just come forward with a troubling story about a man named Paul Davis. She says that 7 years earlier, in 1996, he appeared to take an inappropriate interest in her 10-year-old child.
She met this individual speaking to her daughter at school. He would have been in his late 20s, I guess, maybe 28 years old, and inquired with her daughter, why are you talking with this older man? And she said, oh, his kids go here, or his nieces and nephews go here. He's fine.
Despite her daughter's lack of concern, the woman tells police that she continued to have a bad feeling about Davis. 1 year later, in 1997, she says that the situation got worse when her older, 13-year-old daughter ran away from home. The mother's first thought was that Davis might have had something to do with it.
When she realized that her daughter had left, she went up to her room and started searching through her things, and she found this individual's name written on several notes. There were love letters written to him.
The woman's daughter came back home 2 days later, but her mother was convinced that Davis had had inappropriate contact with her daughter. Police track Davis down and bring him in for questioning. They find that he has a history of spending time with underage girls, most of them around Tabitha's age and blonde. 6 years earlier, in 1997, he was convicted of statutory rape and received 5 years probation.
So he became a pretty big person of interest.
Detectives find that when Tabitha went missing, Davis was living just 3.5 hours away in Kentucky. They also discover that he had made a trip to Nashville around that same time.
He'd come to Nashville earlier in April of 2003. He was seen at the market, at the four-way market, which is only a half a block from the Tudors' residence.
It just seemed like it fit, considering his back history and hanging around in our neighborhood, wanting to talk to young girls.
But when investigators construct a complete timeline for Davis, they realize that he has an alibi for the 29th of April, 2003, the day Tabitha went missing.
He was eliminated based upon his sister giving an alibi for him, saying that he was in Kentucky.
Investigators have no evidence against Davis, So the once promising lead is dead. Over the next few weeks, nothing new develops. The Tudors family suffers every day from the devastating loss of their little girl.
I would go down to the river, and I would walk those river banks from one end to the other, just to see if she was down there. I said, I'm walking the riverbank. I would drive around looking for her. Couldn't find her. It about drove me crazy.
My dad cried a lot. They cried a lot together. We did have a lot of people step up and help out in the beginning. But after a while, some of our friends stopped coming around as much because they didn't know how to comfort us or what to say, or, you know, it's a tough situation, so they choose just to stay away.
Despite their suffering, the Tudors do everything they can to get exposure for Tabitha's case.
We tried to keep the media informed of, you know, everything with Tabitha.
So crazy how this neighborhood has changed, Mom. But we found different things to try and get her name out. That was our first button. I think we made these ourselves. We just kind of popped them in there. And then we figured out that we could order them from a company. So we had these made. The bracelets say, "Bring Tabitha home." I wanted people to look and see what, what my shirt said. And this one, "Still missing," is what it says on the bottom, to let everybody know that she's still missing. And it says, "Help me find my sister." They're worn out. Like the picture on this one is almost gone.
I love that picture.
Yeah.
Over the next few months, numerous tips come in, claiming that Tabitha was spotted in different Nashville neighborhoods. Police check out each and every one, but none of them go anywhere. Until September 12th, 2003, 5 months after Tabitha vanished, when news comes in that suggests extremely disturbing circumstances in her disappearance. A man named Millard Earl Smith has just been arrested in Nashville and charged with rape.
Millard Earl Smith, I heard that he lived on Fesser's Lane, which is about 4 miles from here. They thought that being he was out doing this, that he might have had something to do with Tabitha missing.
He actually made the statement that he is a predator.
5 months after 13-year-old Tabitha Tudors went missing, Nashville police arrest a man named Millard Earl Smith and charge him with the rape of a 17-year-old girl. The circumstances of the crime make detectives wonder if Smith could be involved in Tabitha's disappearance.
He was on his motorcycle and he came across a young couple. It was raining. He offered them a ride. He told them that he would have to take them separately, obviously being on the motorcycle. He ended up taking the boyfriend in one place and took the girl to this trailer and raped her.
Millard Earl Smith lived on Fesser's Lane, which is about 4 miles from here.
Although he doesn't match the description that Tabitha's classmate gave of the driver of the red car, Smith had been convicted of kidnapping, as well as solicitation of a minor in the past year. When Smith is brought in for questioning, detectives discover something that deepens their interest in him.
He did not own a car, but we did find out that he was helping his brother-in-law some in East Nashville who worked on different cars. So he could have had access to a red car.
While police dig into Smith's background and recent whereabouts, results come in from the forensic exam of the library computer that Tabitha used to chat online.
They were able to determine that Tabitha's username had been used on that computer, but they weren't able to find anything to determine what rooms and what she had done on the computer. There had just been so many people that have used it since that it kind of covered up the data.
If there's any evidence on the computer that could help police find Tabitha, it appears to be lost forever. In the meantime, Millard Smith denies any involvement in Tabitha's disappearance. He says he was on a camping trip with family at the time. Though his alibi is never confirmed by police, Smith passes a polygraph test, and investigators can find no evidence linking him to Tabitha. But he remains a person of interest.
He was investigated thoroughly, interviewed, polygraphed, and he really cannot be completely eliminated as a person of interest.
For the Tudors family, as time passes, the lack of answers becomes more and more of an emotional drain.
We had a lot of tips that have gotten our hopes up. Some were like, oh, this is it. Like, this is the lead. This is what's going to bring her back home. And then others, it's like, what are they even talking about? It has been an emotional roller coaster since day one.
Months pass, and the first anniversary of Tabitha's disappearance comes and goes. The Nashville Police Investigations Unit still works tirelessly, exploring every tip that comes in.
I have a 13-year-old at home, and I couldn't imagine her disappearing and me not having any idea what had happened to her. I feel like the burden is on me to try to get answers for the Tudors.
Tabitha's had several different detectives on her case. I can't tell you the number of detectives. And now currently we have Detective Jolly. We feel that Detective Jolly is going to be the man to solve this case.
3 more years pass, and the investigation goes cold again, leaving the Tudors family living in an excruciating state of limbo.
I could drive in my car, and I could hear her singing. And every day for like, I don't know how long, when I get in my car, she was with me. I could hear her, I could see her. She'd be sitting there like she's real. And she'll be singing to me. When I get to laughing, I know people probably thought I was crazy going down the road laughing because she made me laugh all the time.
In 2008, on the 5th anniversary of her disappearance, police asked local newspapers to print a story about Tabitha to put her case back in the public eye. The strategy works. In June, an unexpected tip comes in that contradicts eyewitness reports that police have been working with for years.
My wife's niece said that she had an employee that said Tabitha did not get into a red car that morning. That she had got into a green car.
Nashville news outlets publish a plea for new information, and a brand new tip comes in, directly to the Tudors family.
My niece opened up a tattoo shop, and this guy came in there and was telling her that Tabitha had gotten into a green car.
He was riding his bike, and he stated that Tabitha did in fact get into a green car that morning. He said it was parked at the bus stop at 15th and Boscoville.
It's unknown why the witness waited so long to come forward. But this detail takes the case in a whole new direction. Investigators saturate social media with the new tip.
Detective Jolly immediately picks up on any tips and runs with them.
But in the days and weeks that follow, no new information comes in. Nor are police able to track down a vehicle matching the witness's description. It's another devastating blow to Tabitha's family.
I blame myself, you know. If it wasn't for my kids and my grandkids and my mom, I don't know what I would have done. My grandkids is really what kept me going.
The investigation goes stone cold. 8 years pass with no new developments.
Bo cried a lot with me, and at night when we go to bed, we would talk about her every night and everything before we go to sleep. And then we talk about her every day.
Then, on February 10th, 2016, 13 years after Tabitha's disappearance, the long silence breaks when detectives finally get a lead about the green car. A local woman tells police she just realized she knew someone who owned a car fitting that description back in 2003.
The young lady contacted me and said that she knew of a Hispanic male that lived within just a few blocks of the Tudors, that lived in a duplex and drove a green car.
The man's name is Juan. And police recognize that over the years, this isn't the first time that name has come up in the investigation.
Tabitha knew a man by the name of Juan that was 19 at the time she disappeared, that lived down the street from her, and that she would sometimes go down there while Bo was taking a nap in the afternoon, and that she allegedly smoked cigarettes with him. So when this particular tip about Juan came in, it caught my attention.
And police also learn that Juan was well aware of Tabitha's disappearance.
A woman said that her daughter was married to a man, his name was Juan, and he had gotten emotional and told his friend that he worked with that he owned a car like that, and he was afraid that they were going to be looking for him, and supposedly made comments about it wasn't supposed to happen that way.
Detectives find that Juan now lives just 3.5 hours from Nashville, in Louisville, Kentucky.
We interviewed and interrogated and polygraphed extensively.
Detectives confirm that Juan used to drive a green car owned by a friend, but the vehicle is no longer in his possession. So many years later, investigators have no luck finding it. Juan takes and passes a polygraph test. He maintains his innocence in Tabitha's disappearance and says nothing that detectives find incriminating.
For whatever reason, this woman had really embellished and given information that was not at all accurate. We were able to eliminate Juan in Louisville, Kentucky. He had no connection to Tabitha whatsoever.
Today, 15 years after she disappeared, Detective Stephen Jolly is still actively investigating Tabitha's case.
They are following leads, going back to the very beginning, looking at everything, trying to pick up on anything that they may have missed.
This case is probably on my mind more than most of my other ones. There's just so much to it, and there's so many different avenues and different leads that it often comes to mind. It's been very challenging, but I really wish that I could be the one that could help them get the answers that they're looking for.
The Tudors are still doing everything they can to keep Tabitha's case in the public eye.
I think about my sister every day.
You still have hope that they'll find her?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Didn't take you very long to answer that question.
No, we've never lost hope.
We'll get her back one day. We have thought about moving, and Tabitha's one reason why we haven't moved yet, because where we live at is the only place that she knows where home is.
Tabitha's family says they feel as strongly today as they did when she disappeared that she didn't leave home on her own.
I believe that day that Tabitha come up missing, somebody took her. I don't know if it's somebody that she knew or somebody that she didn't know, but they took her. I know my child didn't run away.
It's heartbreaking on all of us because we didn't get to see her graduate, didn't see her get her driver's license, and just a whole bunch of stuff. And she's got nieces and nephews that she hasn't saw yet, so she needs to get home so she can see them.
I sit and I wonder, she's 27. Would she have kids? And would she be married? And what would her kids look like? And definitely a lot of things run through your head after all these years.